Today we're talking about a game that made me want to throw up.
Did somebody call for an icon?
Sorry, this video is late. I've been engaged in a days-long battle with a pot that had food stuck to the bottom of it. Welcome, and thanks for tuning in. My name is not Sylphie MK. I like talking about video games, and sometimes I accidentally ignite discourse over games that are a decade old. That is to say, thank you for almost 900 subscribers. I really appreciate all the attention the channel's getting. Let's get into Final Fantasy XVI. FF16 takes place on the magical continent of Valisthea, known colloquially as the Twins, because it's two bodies. Storm is the left one, Ash is the right one continent, two big islands. Where we start off, it's divided into 5 color-coded nations: the red one, the yellow one, the blue one, and the slightly darker blue one. Oh, and also the cult that lives on the island to the far west. They're here too. Most folks are regular non-magic people, and they rely on crystals to channel the energy for lighting fires, filling wells. That's mostly it. These shards are mined from larger mother crystals, 5 of which are still in existence. Those who can channel magic are known as bearers, and they are, at best, like second-class citizens. They're generally forced into some sort of servitude. Across the continent, it's a culturally accepted norm. How do we feel about the opposed mythical minority, where the people who are being subjugated are significantly stronger than their oppressors? This trope has never worked for me. I'm just like, okay, can't you just shoot fire at the person who has you in shackles? How did this happen? How did we get here? The bearers also have tattoos on their face that mark them as lower class. And the tattoo is done with poison ink, so it's very difficult to remove. And if you try to get it off, if the procedure goes poorly, the poison can seep into your body. Besides the branded, the other magic folk in Valisthea are the dominants, which is when you're a top who likes rough fuck. The dominants wield the icons.
Did somebody call for an icon?
Which you might recognize as summons from previous Final Fantasy games. They are 8 mythical beings who are really powerful at one kind of magic. The dominants we meet are either in high political standing, WMDs, or both. We follow protagonist Clive Rossfield on his journey to master all 7 elements in order to defeat the big bad. Ignore the fact that I just said there are 8 elements in total. The devs are saving the Leviathan stuff for DLC in order to secure your dollar. In general, the game's presentation is stunning. Both the new music and remixed pieces from previous games are gorgeous. I appreciated how many times the classic rolling arpeggio from the main theme was incorporated into several pieces, almost serving as a sort of overture. The visuals are largely to die for. The pre-rendered cutscenes are insane. They're truly film quality, especially where we start off with the fight between Titan and Shiva. That was so good. Frozen really paved the way for ice girlies in media. Clap for Elsa. There were some graphical aspects that I didn't adore, and this could largely have to do with how I played. I worked really hard in terms of adjusting the game settings and my TV settings and playing in the dark and all this other stuff in order to be able to see properly, but the graphics mode made me ill, so I had to switch to frame rate mode, and that was a significantly better viewing experience. In general, I just thought the game was too dark and a little low contrast. Like, some visuals are just a bit too drab, and I guess it makes the magic crystal stuff stand out really beautifully, but just when you're running around, like, we could have upped the contrast a little bit. Also, as much as the magic is really fun and ostentatious and showy, sometimes it takes up too much of the screen and you can't see what the enemy is doing, and there's no like enemy outline options or anything to make that a little bit easier. I also didn't love the button mapping, but I think the game offers 8 unique mapping options, so there is versatility in that way, and that's my fault for not exploring it. I think my life would have been better if I had dodge on circle. Also, I feel like the game gives you the best 2 icon abilities at the beginning. Phoenix being able to teleport to an enemy and Garuda being able to snatch an enemy towards you gives the player a lot of field control, and the game's combat is a little slow, I guess. The movement feels a little janky at times. So yeah, I think it's tricky that they led with the best 2 abilities first, and then the rest of them, except for Titan's block, the rest of them I'm a little iffy on. In terms of level design, 16 kind of reminds me of 7 Remake and FF Origins, but make it bigger. Like, those games are very much walk through the hallway and deal with the big boss at the end. And 16 also has this in its gameplay loop, but they combine this kind of hallway dungeon style with bigger open areas. However, especially with the open areas, I found the pacing to be slow, and just in general, the gameplay loop is a little repetitive. You were doing a lot of the same thing over and over again. The dialogue also runs at a glacial pace. These characters talk a lot, and yet they say so little. 16 desperately needed a text log so you could go back and review conversations because I found the scenes so boring. But if a decision is finally made and you miss the single line of dialogue where story action occurs amongst a field of watching grass grow, you missed it. Sorry. You can go kick rocks. This is compounded by the lack of an index for the first third of the game. If maybe you don't understand where the borders are across this continent, that's really unfortunate because the world map that we have access to that absolutely tanks the loading speed of an otherwise quite snappy main menu is completely unlabeled. There are no borders, no country titles. Leaving your cursor over a 3D object that is placed on the map doesn't make any flavor text occur. You can't figure out anything from the map that you have access to at all times. The journal screen on the pause menu is largely empty. It only shows the quests you're working on. And I think the whole negative space could have been used so the player would have an index, again, at all times, so that you can review terms and check out what's going on in the world. And if you didn't really understand what happened with a character, you can figure that out. This world is rich and has a lot of history. And other Final Fantasy games have character indices, enemy indices, plot points, story beats, historical information, important objects. Like, there are so many things, especially for a game like this that kind of attempts at being a Game of Thrones, complicated melodrama with many moving pieces surrounding war. It's so important for the player to be able to grab onto something. But I just felt that there was no glue for my first 10 hours of playing. I understood what was going on in an objective sense. If I see a war happening, I can see that, right? But it was hard to get context for what's going on. It's also stupid that the game actually does have an index. It's just locked behind a progression point and you have to talk to a specific character to access it. I spent 40 minutes reviewing the plot of the story after meeting Vivian, which also, she's fierce. The way that she recounts what's happening in the world and adds a lot of flavor to it. I was living for Vivian Ninetails. Do we know anything about her? Not really. She's a scholar and that's it. But she can really sell a story. Up until meeting her, the only way that you can access information is through a feature called the Active Time Lore. You have access to this feature, I think, at all times during the game, but during cutscenes is probably when you're going to need it the most. You can hold the pause menu and then a bunch of icons will show up to explain like who the characters in the scene are, the context of what they're talking about, if they're talking about a specific group of soldiers, a historical event. There's usually an icon for the location you're in right now. That is available to the player, but the cons are it's only available in the moment. If the scene is over and that character is off screen now, you can actually check who that character was. It sets the expectation that you have to interrupt the scene. The way the game delivers information to the player is just not satisfactory. Onto the setting itself, I've already said that I found the level design to be pretty repetitive. After the 10th time of helping the key village person with whatever they need and getting a little tchotchke from them that arbitrarily grants us access to the next area, I was over it. I was hoping that Clive would display his little trinkets somewhere on his outfit, but that doesn't happen. It's my headcanon that Clive keeps a cute straight allyship tote in his infinite bag of holdings, and all of his pins and baubles and cards are all just on that bag to give him an all access pass to wherever he needs to go. There are two types of areas besides our home bases. There are the semi-open world portions and then the dungeon portions. The open areas are kind of like Dragon Age Inquisitions, just much smaller, but you can freely traverse in them. There's fast travel between key points on these maps. The dungeons are hallways. You walk in a straight line until you hit a strangely circular area, and then you go, oh, they're communicating that a fight is about to happen. And then a fight happens, and then you go back into the hallway on the other end, and then you keep going. There are a few group battles, and then 1 to 2 mini bosses, and then there's always a big boss fight at the end, and then usually that caps off the story in the dungeon, and you typically can't go back to that area. But this is the formula. Arrive at open area, solve local problem, head to the dungeon, beat the boss, and the story happens within this framework. Okay, now we're gonna talk about the plot. This is the spoiler portion of the video. You've been warned. If you don't care about spoilers, thank you for having me. But if you don't want to know, log off. Like, subscribe, leave a tip before you leave though. Normally, I place a lot of emphasis on characters when I review games. I just find that, especially with many of the RPGs that I play, characters are really what hooks me to the story. I tend to be fascinated with how they interact with the circumstances that they're in. In FF16, that is unfortunately not the case. I find a lot of the characters to be dry, to say the least, and no one is making an interesting choice in this game. It just doesn't happen. I found myself more interested in the setting, the secrets of the world, and how the plot was going to unfold around these characters who are part of a machination that is much greater than themselves. I've mentioned that we opened during a fight between Shiva and Titan. If you had asked me to explain this fight in even the first 10 hours of this game, I literally wouldn't have been able to do it for any sum of money. But now I understand that the yellow Earth Crystal place, the Dhalmekian Republic, is being attacked by the Iron Kingdom, which is the cult, because they think bearers and dominants and all magic people are an abomination and need to be cleansed from the earth. But they're not above using Shiva as a weapon of mass destruction in order to meet that end. Shiva is a prisoner of war, and they coerce her into fighting by torturing her people in front of her. Hugo Kupka is the leader of Dhalmekia, and he's in a meeting with the kingdom of Walud, which I love that name. I'm Lebanese, and if you know Arab glamour, in my mind I can only say it the same way that bougie Arab celebrities talk, in that kind of sultry, elegant tone. Walud. He's meeting with the kingdom of Walud's ruler, and they're asking for help in the war effort. Walud says no, but Hugo and Walud, advisor Benedicta Harmon, have a spicy scene. The clothes stay on, but you could tell that they wanted to rip it off. They were kind of hot. I was into this couple. Clive is also semi a part of this war. He's here under the name Wyvern, probably for dehumanizing reasons, with a group that I'm going to call the Village People because these characters are unimportant and we get rid of them pretty quickly and I don't remember what they're actually called. They are on a mission on behalf of the Holy Empire of Sambrek, which is the Blue Nation to the north, and they've been tasked with beheading the dominant of Shiva. We get a flashback to Clive's childhood in the Grand Duchy of Rosaria, the Red Nation. He's training to be a shield, which is basically a knight, for his brother Joshua, Phoenix's dominant. Clive is strong and competent, whereas Joshua is frail and he's been ill his whole life. There is a big age gap between the brothers that for some reason doesn't get acknowledged in the family tension, but the dukedom is having some internal problems. There's conflict within the family because it's suggested, especially by Annabella, the mom, that Clive may have been better suited to be Phoenix's dominant. The lineage also follows the dominant, so Joshua is the heir apparent to the duchy. Joshua has bestowed upon Clive the blessing of the Phoenix, so Clive has a portion of the icon's power. The blessing of the Phoenix certainly helps Clive go much farther than his peers. They go to the Phoenix Gate with their dad so Joshua can do some icon stuff, but everyone is betrayed by the Duchess Annabella because she's a eugenics freak and she defects to Sanbrek for good reasons, I'm sure. Joshua primes, which is when a dominant goes sicko mode and becomes the beast. He mega evolves into Phoenix and burns the whole place to the fucking ground after seeing his father get the worst haircut of his life. Clive has been fighting defectors in the meantime, and he watches his brother become Phoenix in the sky. He also sees a mysterious hooded figure. And then to the audience, Clive really obviously primes into Ifrit. New icon of fire just dropped. As Ifrit and Phoenix, Clive and Joshua get into a really huge fight and start just ripping into each other. In the aftermath of the fight, everyone is dead. Joshua's body is never recovered. Clive is forced into servitude by his mom, Queen of Phrenology. The game starts gaslighting us by saying that everyone died at Phoenix Gate, but almost no one died at Stonewall. Joshua survived, which isn't shocking because he's the Phoenix, so narratively we expect him to rise from the ashes. He gets one free pass. One fake out death. You know what I mean? Clive has two retainers at the beginning, Wade and Tyler, and I love that they give him two himbo frat boys to travel with. Wade is certainly alive post time skip, and Tyler is in a very unique position as the only character who is probably dead, but his index entry doesn't show his icon grayed out. So was that a mistake? Or is Tyler alive? I'm putting out an alert. Where is Tyler? Clive has been forced into servitude. He's been branded, again, by his own mom, and he has no recollection that he just Cain-enabled his baby brother. No awareness that he's a Freet. Not a clue. That brings us back to now, to the battle in the desert. Titan and Shiva hit a stalemate, and both sides kind of just retreat once the losses are too great. But remember, the Soul Cycle Village people are after Shiva, so we still have a mission to do. They reach her, and she's been muzzled by the Iron Crusade soldiers, and then they start attacking children in front of her to instigate priming, but she's used too much power, so she doesn't Gigantamax, she just Dynamaxes. It's powerful, but less powerful than becoming a full dominant monster. It's here that Clive realizes Shiva is Jill Warwick, his childhood friend who lived in the castle with them in Rosaria as a prisoner of war to prevent Rosaria's neighbors from the north from mounting another attack against the duchy. She grew up with the Rossfields. She was like a sister to them, but not. She's also really close with Torgal, which is Clive's dog, but I thought it was Jill's dog because they're so close to each other. I didn't know that it was Clive's dog until Torgal conveniently comes back later, like Jon Snow's direwolf. Clive really has a Jon Snow energy. Is Jill Ygritte then? And Sid is Tyrion, and Joshua is Bran. Oh my god, Dion is the gay brother. Sorry, I'm halting that train of thought. Jill was captured by the Iron Kingdom during the chaos of the Phoenix Gate debacle, and she later awakened as Shiva. Also, yeah, becoming a dominant is not necessarily a from birth thing. People who aren't from Valisthea can just arrive in the country and become one. The rules of this, not clear. Not necessarily important either. The village people subdue Jill during the fight, but Clive refuses to behead Bestie, which honestly, fair, I would do the same thing. This makes the head gay in charge angry, and then Clive hate crimes him and saves Jill. Some more Iron Kingdom people come, and then they're spirited away by Sid. The game loves to use that term specifically, spirited away, during all the instances that they randomly teleport people from a situation that would be too challenging for them and alter the story. Sid is the charming resistance leader of the game, one of maybe 3 people with a personality here. He also happens to have an adult Torgal, which is very convenient. Jill is currently in a coma, in a catatonic state, so he takes them back to his hideout for her to get healed. Clive's life mission right now is to get revenge on the person who killed his brother. Again, he's really traumatized and he has no idea that that person is himself. He thinks it was the hooded figure who appeared before him, which in a way it was because the hooded figure gave him Ifrit, but Clive did it, and the game is an unreliable narrator and he just doesn't know it yet. The party gets word of the second dominant of fire. They don't know it's Joshua, but it is, and he's just conveniently wearing the same robes as the illusionary man from the Night of the Phoenix Gate. A very Kingdom Hearts coded strategy to mislead the audience. The news takes them to some castle occupied by Waloed, where not Joshua is being held. Benedicta and King Barnabas have a post-romance scene where she is like dedicating her whole self to his cause. She's obsessed with him, but she's really afraid of him. Sid and Clive arrive. Clive gets into a gauntlet of fights with Benna, and Sid gets quickly taken out of commission despite also being a dominant. Clive seems to be attracting a lot of the same type of person. Sid is the dominant of lightning god Rama, but he's pretty affected by the crystal curse, which is when your body turns into stone over time from using too much magic. Sid is a foreigner to this country. I'm assuming he got Rama at some point in his adulthood, probably, and he used to be from Waloed, but he defected. The water runs deep between Benedicta and Sid. They used to be an item. So Benedicta has a lot on her plate when it comes to men. She's a bit of an icon chaser. Clive gets the upper hand in their fight, and Joshua also blows up the place to escape. In that chaos, Clive accidentally absorbs a portion of Garuda from Benedicta, so he becomes an airbender here. Benna loses it. She obviously really coveted the power of Garuda. She really loved being a girl boss, which is so valid because it suits her, and Clive just effortlessly took it. I'd be furious too if someone just stole something from me like that. Since Joshua is leaving, Clive and Sid prioritize following his trail, and Benedicta flees with the Waloeder forces. She's struggling to access Garuda and is petrified that Barnabas is going to kill her now that she's outlived her usefulness. Their group gets ambushed by some bandits, and they don't kill Benedicta because they can sell her instead. The bandits threaten to not do nice things to her, and she has some sort of out-of-body experience right after they say that, where she thinks about Sid and how she should have left Barnabas, and this is her punishment for not doing the right thing or whatever. I'm very glad that the game didn't sensationalize this type of violence, because when she comes to, she is able to summon a huge tornado and knock the men away. I'm grateful for that. She's able to channel Garuda again, but the problem is she's funneling too much magic energy and she loses control. Her eyes turn yellow. Classic sign of supernatural villainy. Clive has the big boss fight with her here. Garuda, in my opinion, is the worst big boss fight of the game. The fight is just less engaging than the other battles. Garuda is also crawling, and as much as I love looking at monster ass, I was a little like, girl, get up. I was expecting a little bit more flying, especially because the fight takes place on a floating island in the air. There aren't really huge moments, and also visually, with all the wind, the fight is like really gray, muted, minimalistic, drab. If this were a game about characters with interesting personalities making difficult choices, I think Benedicta would have had a sort of anti-hero arc where if afforded the choice, she would actually defect from the bad guys and join us, but it's easier to just kill her. So we don't get this anti-hero Taylor Swift Eras Tour moment for Benedicta. Rest in peace, Benna. You were a shining star in an otherwise empty sky. You will be sorely missed. Thank you for serving. In this fight, Clive primes into Ifrit again for the first time since Phoenix Gate. He loses control, but then Sid tells him after, "It's you. Hi. You're the problem. It's you." Am I a Taylor fan? Not really. In this realization, Clive has to confront that he's probably his brother's murderer, but also if there's still a second dominant of fire running around, who's it gonna be? It's not a baby, it's probably Joshua. After this, Jill wakes up, her and Clive have a sweet reunion, and at some point Sid reveals that his motivation is to destroy the big mother crystals because they're what's causing the blight. I didn't explain the blight. The blight is a magic disease that is spreading throughout the land, making it uninhabitable. Nothing grows there. The water's bad, and there's no magic to be channeled. You can't use magic in those areas. That's the blight. I initially interpreted this as having to do with the massive crystal mining operation because they get the crystals that they channel for everyday things from these large crystals, and maybe it's sapping energy from the land in order to maintain itself, and maybe there'd be an environmental lean to this or something. Not the case. Magic is just bad and they have to shut off the service. It has nothing to do with the crystals themselves. The blight is just a magic disease, so the continent is taking its medicine whether it likes it or not. They go to the Sambrek Empire and get that crystal first. They enter a dungeon left behind by the Fallen, which are an extinct ancient people, clearly connected to the origins of magic. They are intercepted at the Mother Crystal by an alien-looking mythical figure named Ultima. A confirmed he/him, but he's giving they. Ultima refers to Clive as Mythos. The game pronounces it like mythos. There's a U in there. And he says he wants to use Clive as a vessel. I'd also like to be inside Clive. So stupid. So obviously this journey that we're going on to destroy the crystals and get the 7 Chaos Emeralds is gonna be in service of this god, right? Anyways, Sid gets magic sniped here, and Clive goes into liminal space and copes with the fact that he is a Freet and learns how to channel the being's power. In Sid's death, Clive also acknowledges that his quest to kill his brother's killer is counterproductive. It doesn't make sense anymore. He's now determined that he's not going to unalive himself. After bringing it up in the naked prison scene that I didn't mention earlier, where Sid calls him a hottie, but he's not his type, he decides that he's now going to carry out Sid's will and destroy the mother crystals. But Ultima really has the upper hand in this moment. Thankfully, Joshua is a lurker, and he will be in proximity to every single important event in the game. So he swoops in and absorbs Ultima into his chest, which will surely have a long-term consequence, right? Clive is elated to know that Joshua lives, although they don't have a reunion because Clive and Jill are down for the count, but not before Clive sucks up lightning god Rama energy from Sid. Rama is my least favorite of the 7. His weird scope ability is just brutal. It doesn't work. We have a second time skip here and nothing changes at all. Everyone has the same designs except for Clive, despite another 5 years passing, which is also odd because Jill has like a new portrait for some odd reason. Like, give her a new outfit. It's been a long time. Thankfully, the game did add alt costume options sometime after release, so I think this is a good opportunity to outfit your characters in some new digs. In the meantime, there was a war between Sanbrek and Waloed. Dion, who has the light icon Bahamut, and Barnabas, who has the dark icon Odin, get into a huge battle, and Hugo gets Benedicta's mutilated body in a box and is on a quest to avenge her because he's told that Clive did it. Just when you thought they weren't going to brutalize Benedicta's body for effect. Just when you thought. They lured me into a false sense of security. We also meet my favorite character, Medicine Girl. She is peddling her ointments and her salves in the Dalmekian Republic with a 1940s newsboy hustle that one simply has to respect. I didn't think she mattered, and then I saw that she has an index entry, so I knew she'd be important in some way. I had high hopes for Medicine Girl, maybe the next Bahamut, maybe the next Phoenix because she's a healer. Clive's goals are now to find Joshua and complete Sid's mission, so they go to meet his uncle, Lord Byron, a character guilty of having simply too much dialogue, but they need access to the port to get to the red mother crystal on the island occupied by the Iron Cult. At this point, we're headed to where Jill was captured for a significant portion of her life, and we get a revenge motivation for her Thank God some semblance of a character is emerging. Understandably, she wants to kill the people who tortured her and murdered her people as a bargaining chip, specifically the patriarch of the island. I'm really glad they gave Jill a moment here, especially because she has a little bit of bite. She's pretty calm, pretty agreeable for most of the game, so she has that kind of personality when, if they're being aggressive, they really mean it. They go to this volcano island. Jill gets her revenge in a real good for her moment. An anthropomorphic fire monster is summoned from the lava, but all of the icons except Clive's are secretly flops, and Jill can't actually do much except for stop the lava from spreading. Like, she can't fight the fire monster for whatever reason. Clive gets all the action. Joshua is also lingering here because he loves to be mysterious and evasive for reasons, and he will never stop. Joshua's like main goal also doesn't impede him from having a relationship with his brother. So it's like, girl, are you anxious avoidant? What's wrong with you? Talk to him. It seems like it would be really important and maybe healing for the both of you. Here's where I thought that the game might be teasing at the idea that Clive and Jill aren't necessarily doing the right thing by destroying all of the crystals. After playing Bravely Default, I have long-standing trust issues with these crystal stories because you never know. Jill has a moment after the battle where she justifies her violence, and Clive has like a kind of awkward, quiet response. I was like, ooh, is Jill getting like a villain edit here? Are we getting a different type of arc? And at this point, I was so bored by and unattached to the characters that I was just hoping for some sort of twist to surprise me and get me engaged. And the heroes not being the good guys would kind of be a crazy reveal. That twist never comes. Spoiler alert if you can't tell by my tone. I was also kind of hoping that the game would touch on the hypocrisy of their mission, because Clive is deciding on his own that disrupting everybody's way of life will be worth it. Just like Ultima is allegedly deciding to take free will away from humanity in order to deliver them to the promised land. Of course, it's a complicated question that would have a lot of answers, but I think Clive and Ultima at face value are doing very similar things. I think because Clive is the hero and isn't going to go there, and Ultima having an ulterior motive, it's very easy to justify Clive as right. But I think there's a more complicated question here that isn't being explored at all because the game isn't willing to do things. After destroying the Mother Crystal, Hugo re-enters as our second act villain. It's time for his revenge plot. In the background, Annabella, remember her? She loves to bang her cousin. I didn't mention that. The Duke and her, Clive's parents, are cousins. She's married to the Emperor of Sanbreque, and they have a demon child together named Olivier. Dion is starting to get like pushed out of the family, particularly by Annabella, because he isn't the Emperor's biological son. He's adopted because he's Bahamut. And in case I haven't made it clear enough, Annabella is a eugenics freak. After the Sanbreque crystal was destroyed, they take over the Crystalline Dominion, the other blue nation that is in the middle of the map. They're like Switzerland in that they're neutral. The Empire took over that country after losing their crystal. The Emperor sends Dion on a fake mission to get him away from the capital while they crown Olivier, and Dion has literally the most thrilling moment of the entire game when he makes out with his retainer at the camp. Gay kissing shot from really far away. When there are straight sex scenes in this game, I'll take what I can get. Joshua, again, serial lurker, serial stalker, finds Dion at his camp, and he warns him that a shadow hangs over his house. Basically, Ultima is doing something to influence his family, and that's why Dion is getting pushed away. Joshua is still sick. He consistently refuses to take his medicine. Medicine Girl makes a cameo appearance at the camp. Slay! Ultima is also lodged in his chest. I don't know. I think there's supposed to be a certain irony because through Phoenix, he has access to crazy healing magic, and yet he can't heal himself. There's something there. Is destroying Rosaria, so Clive goes, even though Hugo is clearly only doing this to bait him. Everyone gets captured. Hugo is going to execute Jill in an eye for an eye situation. Torgal awakens here as a magic ice wolf. Torgal is able to halt the execution, and then Clive and Hugo have fight one in the castle basement. Clive wins the interaction and gets Hugo's earth powers, but then he's quickly saved by Sleipnir, who is Barnabas's other retainer from the beginning, who doesn't really get much screen time until now. Jill takes a little bit of time off, so Clive goes through the desert towards the Mother Crystal here, accompanied by his annoying uncle. Fast forwarding, we make it to Hugo. The underground castle here underneath the crystal is absolutely stunning, and the Ifrit versus Titan fight is really cool. It starts off underground, and then they go up through the surface, and then there's like an infinite falling segment that maybe overstays its welcome a little bit, but just the visual spectacle of it was so cool. And then Titan enters rage mode and actually Gigantamaxes. He becomes huge. And then this portion, is where they started to lose me a little bit. They were doing Fast and Furious. They were doing a Sonic. It was a cool fight. A little bit over the top, but I love camp, so I'll take it. Anyways, Ifrit wins. That's Clive's destiny. Hugo ends up dead. Next, we have to sneak into the Crystalline Dominion because they're not just going to let us sneak in. So the group pretends that they're merchants in order to get through. By the time they arrive to the capital, Dion has performed a coup. Dragoons are tearing apart the city, and he accidentally murders his dad because he jumps in front of a lance that was aimed at Olivier. After Dion's murder attempt failed, Olivier walks up to him and reveals that he's being possessed by Ultima. Who knows if this is even a real child? And he makes fun of Dion for falling into his trap. Dion loses it, starts blowing up the city as Bahamut, including remaking the Mother Crystal into a flower for reasons. It's really beautiful, so I'll accept it, but does it make sense? No. Clive and Jill are running through on the ground, beating mobs. Bahamut and Phoenix are fighting in the sky, so confirmed Joshua is here. Conveniently, the still living Rosaria and Duchy all wind up in the same room together to hash out some family drama. Annabella starts screaming at Clive. Clive chides her for not looking out the window and seeing that Joshua is clearly still alive and engaged in mid-air spectacle. Phoenix crashes into the castle room and reverts into his human form. Jill pulls a sword on Annabella. It's major drama. Then we have the fight against Bahamut, which takes place on a glass platform within the crystal flower, the same type of flower that Dion's father gave him earlier, because if there's one thing a Square Enix game is going to do, it's turn an aesthetic piece of flora into a very impactful symbol. The flower represents Dion's relationship with his father, and it's impactful that Olivier is also given the same flower, which he just carelessly drops, and then Annabella crushes it under her foot after being a eugenics freak to Dion. Anyways, this is by far the prettiest fight in the game. Again, a little too long, overstays its welcome, maybe has one or two phases that we didn't need. The crystal platform is beautiful. There's a moment where you take over Phoenix and it becomes just a bullet hell against Bahamut, which is cool. The part where they lose me is when Clive and Joshua do the fusion dance and then become an Ifrit Phoenix combined entity. And then when it really gets crazy is when the fight ends in space. Anyways, obviously we win because we're Clive, and we end up back in the castle room with Dion. He chucks a lance at Olivier from the ground, which I know the physics of that just like doesn't work. He must be really strong. And Olivier disintegrates, which is why I said he was like a fake demon child earlier, because there's no body left behind. Was Olivier ever real? Was he always a figment? Is Annabella an emissary of Ultima and we just don't know it? Who can ever be sure? Annabella gets a grand patter song monologue here where she talks about how hard it is to no longer have a cousin to make babies with, and how Joshua was a flop and it should have been Clive and all this other stuff. But then she completely dissociates and unalives herself because she is a girl boss, and if there's one thing she's gonna do, it's reclaim the narrative. Clive sucks up Dion's power and then they go back to the hideout. Also, now that the last Mother Crystal in Storm is done, not only is the blight getting worse, but parts of the land are becoming akashic, which is like the opposite. There's too much magic and the people become violent zombies for whatever reason. In the meantime, Sid had a daughter the whole time reveal. Mid is an engineering student who conveniently hasn't been in the plot at all because she's learning engineering things at university. She's building us a boat so we can get across the water, dividing Storm from Ash. Ash is where Waloed is, also where the last crystal is, and obviously that's our goal. On the way, we fight Sleipnir and beat him. Then later he multiplies and there's a bunch of him. Also, a cursory wiki search tells us he's 52. Be so for real. He's a magic invention of Barnabas through Odin. Oh, we also get like a nude scene of Barnabas with Hugo and Benedicta, but it's just Ultima showing him illusions. He has Barnabas wrapped around his finger with the promise of letting him into the Holy Land once all of this stuff shakes out. He also shows a vision of a nude young woman who is Barnabas's mother. So it's not incest, but it's not incestual, perhaps in a way. Maybe a little Oedipesian, Oedipus coded. Who can ever be sure? They talk about the grand plan being to disrupt Clive's relationships so that he's less tethered to the world, and if he's like depressed, I guess, he'll be more willing to become the vessel of Mythos. But this doesn't actually go anywhere. I thought this meant that main cast was going to start getting killed and someone was going to be like a liar. There would be a mole. Maybe Ultima takes over someone like he did Olivier and he's sowing discord within the group. I thought, the villains threatening the audience with a plan to move the story forward would actually mean something, but everyone is fine and safe and nothing actually happens related to this. Oh, also right after the Sleipnir fight, Sleipnir is like down and out, and then Barnabas really badly injures Clive, and then Jill stays back, I guess to give them an opening to escape, and she gets maybe captured, maybe killed by Barnabas, who is like clearly much stronger than everybody else in our party. And the game has a big scene after that where Clive wakes up from a long nap, and they just don't talk about Jill very much. There's a distinct lack of urgency. Not enough people saying, okay, but we have to save Jill, right? I thought that would be a hot topic of conversation because your friend with whom you share romantic tension with is missing or dead. No one seems bothered by that. We set sail and then Barnabas intercepts us. I was worried for a big chunk of the plot because Ultima seems omnipotent, so I was concerned that Clive, and because Joshua has a piece of Ultima within him, that they were like homing beacons, so they would always be putting everybody else in danger because of that visibility. That's not a thing. Barnabas just happens upon us so plot can happen. There's not really a naval battle here, more so just like two ships in the same ocean at the same time. Joshua fights with Barnabas a little bit. Clive somehow gets onto the enemy boat and Jill is in there. He saves her, and then Barnabas has a cool moment where he parts the ocean with a big sword slash, and it doesn't immediately fill. He and Clive get into a battle at the bottom of this ocean crevice, which is a scripted loss, by the way. I don't think you can win. If you can, let me know down below. I think they just wanted this fight to happen in a really impressive place. Clive loses. Barnabas is able to escape because he's god tier, and then the water finally starts sinking after the fight is over, and Jill uses her ice powers to build a tunnel for them underneath the water, even though it's all crashing down. I thought maybe this was a moment to prime and then you can get to the surface and then go from there. Thankfully, they wind up on a beach somewhere naked. Clive romantically takes some of Shiva's powers and now they're an item. Also, every time Clive has taken icon powers from somebody else, he like basically has a heart attack, and it's clearly painful for the person that he's taking it from. But in this instance, Clive doesn't have a heart attack, and Jill seems to be receiving some sort of pleasure from this exchange. You can make that part happen and then they can just have like normal sex. Meanwhile, Dion somewhere has been saved by the breakout star, Medicine Girl. Everybody clap for Medicine Girl. The only comments I want to see down below are Medicine Girl compliments in all caps with clapping emojis, please. Dion then protects Dhalmekia's capital and then breaks up with his boyfriend. Not even a kiss goodbye? Homophobia. Anyways, he gives Terrence a bag of money to give to Medicine Girl, which she then uses to reinvest in herself and become a rapper. We cross back over the sea later on the boat again because the boat is important. This time, Jill stays to protect the boat, and Joshua comes with us for part of the mission, but quickly splits off to go gawk at a temple painting. Clive fights Barnabas. This is not a very gratifying fight because there's a lot of cinematics and switching back and forth between human and icon modes, and there's a lot happening. You don't actually get to control Ifrit either in this final boss fight against Barnabas. Clive bests him. Barnabas is very happy that he can offer his master a worthy vessel because he's really indoctrinated into that. While dying, he shoots a bunch of dark magic into Clive unwillingly. So now our hero is the master of all 7 elements. Again, forget that I said that there were 8 elements. Flash forward, we make it to the north of Ash where the Mother Crystal is. There's a huge gauntlet of enemies. Please, games, abolish long end game segments that conflate challenge with length. It's not harder because it's longer. It's just longer. We make it to Ultima. Joshua has rejoined us at some point after his little excursion. Dion is back and he and Jill are fighting off monsters after Mid crashes her very important boat into the side of the city. And I was like, no girl, you worked really hard on that boat. It's an engineering marvel. You made engines. Don't do that. The last Mother Crystal gets destroyed. Ultima also ports us to some other liminal space, and he describes the creation story of Valisthea and how his ancient race of people, the Fallen, brought magic to the continent, and the reason why they came to Valisthea in the first place was because the blight overran their previous place of living, so magic didn't exist here before they brought it. Also, his plan isn't to like end humanity and bring them to heaven where they have no free will but at least continue existing. He wants to destroy humanity and revive his people, who are all sleeping in Gag City, which is inside of a giant crystal which is submerged under Niagara Falls. After beating Ultima, he raises the Niagara crystal from the water, and Clive, Dion, and Joshua jump off of the hideaway and ride off on Bahamut's back, and the shot is just really funny to me. It's kind of anticlimactic. Jill is pissed that she was left out of the final battle, and honestly, so was I. There are 4 icons left. Why aren't all of them a part of this? Since it's the last big bad fight, I thought finally we'd get payoff for the crystal in Joshua's chest that contains a piece of Ultima. I was hoping for a betrayal, something a little bit more melodramatic, so we can really capitalize on that agony of like brothers who have always had tension, who were separated and then joyfully reunited again, and then something villainous and sad would happen, because then maybe that would disrupt Clive's relationships and give him uneven footing and make him sad, and then Ultima can take over and become mythos and then revive his people from Gag City. But this is a game where beautiful things happen and that's it. So don't worry about it. The game is allergic to making interesting choices though, so sadly there is no betrayal in Gag City. Dion dies and he feels like he's atoned for killing his father. Clive kills Ultima forever with a shockingly cartoonish punch in the face that made me laugh. There's a drawn out memorial scene for Joshua, who is now dying for real this time. Clive turns into stone, such is the cost for overusing magic, and then Gag City explodes and magic is done forever. The real gag is the post-credits scene, which happens an indiscernible amount of time after our main story, and 2 medieval children have come from gathering sticks or drinking Four Locos or whatever it is kids that age do. Their mom asks the older kid to start a fire, the classic way, flint and rock, Minecraft girlies rise up. The kid complains and wishes that lighting a fire was as easy as it is in the fairy tale that they're reading, in which people can use crystals to light fires and it's really convenient. The mom is like, haha, well, we don't have that, and the fire isn't gonna light itself, so I can make you a meal, so can you please just do that for me, please? And the kid slays it. He does start that fire, and then mom tells him to go outside and play with his baby brother until the evening, and they argue over who gets to be Ifrit. Oh my god. Then we pan over to a book. The book is titled Final Fantasy by Joshua Rossfield, which, reminder, he's dead. Nerds across the world were blowing their loads simultaneously in this moment because there's a huge implication that there's more for the series. Many have interpreted this book to mean that one of the Rossfield brothers is still alive. Some people think it's Joshua for real. Some people think it's actually Clive, but he just used Joshua's name in honor of him. I think they're dead. And Joshua had this novel in the drafts and someone published it, or this is just a long, trite fiction within fiction that we just played for 40 hours and it was a book the whole time. There's still DLC to come. The first wave came out in December, and that canonically takes place before the final fight. The Leviathan DLC comes out sometime in the spring. Who knows when that's occurring? It also happens in a different continent, so there's a new land to explore. Maybe that will serve as a post game and Clive is alive, but I guess we'll just have to wait and see. Those are my thoughts on Final Fantasy XVI. Is this a game I'm ever going to replay? Perhaps. I think the DLC could probably be pretty cool. I like the combat. I think visually it's really stunning. I just wish that the characters had a little bit more going on, because I was holding on to hope for so long that something interesting would happen, or it would exceed or subvert my expectations. And clearly it was very stimulating for me because I got excited and I was developing theories throughout the process. And then it was just a little bit disappointing that they didn't really capitalize on those opportunities to really do something special. I do think they could have taken the character development a little bit further. Clive to me feels like the only character who has a game spanning arc, and I think maybe if they took some time away from mundane village quests and maybe trimmed down the battles a little bit, some of this time might have been better spent with the characters. And I think FF16 limits itself in some ways by killing off a lot of characters earlier than maybe they should be, because I think those characters have a lot to do and say, especially when it comes to forgiveness and redemption. Those are both major themes for Clive, and I feel like he gets afforded those things because he's the main character, but I think Sid had more to do in this story, as did Benedicta, as did Annabella, even Barnabas. Like, he's pretty poorly established given his screen time. The story does a lot of good work at the beginning to set up a cast of characters who exist in this gray zone, but I found that by the end of the experience, this gray zone is superficial because our good guys are just good guys and our bad guys are just bad guys. There's no status quo shift, and there's no opportunities for characters who aren't Clive to get a redemption or develop in different ways. I think narratively, Annabella's death is probably the only one that makes really concrete sense to me, because it demonstrates her demand for control and shows that not everyone gets justice. She doesn't really have a satisfying comeuppance, and there's meaning in that. I just think in another story, a lot of these characters have much more to offer, and that is probably the game's biggest missed opportunity. Anyways, the last thing I need to do is make this video longer than it already is. Thanks for watching. Did you play Final Fantasy XVI? Did you like Final Fantasy XVI? Do you feel similarly to me in that it doesn't hit a lot of the marks that you hoped for it to hit? I really wanted this to be like a comparable Game of Thrones video game experience, and I don't think they really delivered that. Not that they had to, but I think it could have been cool. I guess this was kind of accurate to Game of Thrones in that it started off good and then didn't stick the landing for me. Which Final Fantasy is your favorite? Are you excited for Final Fantasy VII Rebirth coming out at the end of February? I am so excited for that game. I want to get the special edition so bad, even though I probably shouldn't pay for that. Anyways, yeah, thanks for watching. Feel free to like and subscribe. Thank you for being here. We're so close to getting monetized. I really, really, really want to hit that 1,000 soon. The channel has grown astronomically in the past like week and a half, and I am really grateful for that. So thank you so much. Okay, have a good one.